to Inner Peace Better Health, the podcast where we explore stories of strength, growth, and transformation. I'm your host, Saima, and today's guest is Dr. Jenn Donahue, retired U.S. Navy captain, engineer, professor, author, and keynote speaker. From building bridges in war zones to leading thousands in combat zones, Jenn's life is a testament to resilience, leadership, and daring to rise beyond every barrier. She's here to share how we can overcome the internal blocks that hold us back and how personal growth truly starts within. So, Jen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here.
Oh, so am I. You're warmly welcome. Now, let's start with like you have led teams in some of the most high pressure environments imaginable. Can you share what's one internal barrier you had to overcome to lead with confidence in such intense situations?
Well, there was a time whenever I was in Afghanistan when I was leading 800 people. And, there were days when I just woke up and just felt like I was not enough. And I wasn't enough for my people. I wasn't enough for the mission. And you have to get over that in order to be a better leader. But it's one of those things that, like, I'd wake up like several mornings while I was over there and just think, I'm just not enough. And that's one of the things that really helped me realize that, I have some, internal thoughts that need to be overcome because I know that I'm there for a purpose. And that's one of the biggest struggles that I've had in my life is just really starting to understand that there are competing voices in our head and we need to somehow overcome those.
Mm-hmm. So, how can someone practice that kind of internal strength in everyday life?
One of the best things that I found was to really ground myself. And what I mean by that is I had to believe that I was there for a purpose. So what I would do is, I know this sounds silly, but I would go over to the printer, I would grab a clean piece of paper, and I would just start to write down all of the best things about myself. If I won the 4th grade spelling bee, so I wrote that down and I started to write down, okay, I have a degree. I helped this person the other day whenever they were struggling. And I would start to write down all of these positive things about me. And whenever I started to really go through those and I would really look at that piece of paper and realize, no, wait a minute, I have all of these really great strengths. And by doing this really over and over again, every time I would have those really negative thoughts start to come through, I would just grab that piece of paper and I would just start to write all over again. And this is something that people can do like every day is really focus on some of the really positive things that they've done in their life.
That's powerful, Jen. It shows that, courage isn't about the absence of fear, but choosing to lead anyway, right?
That's true. You know, we it's how we show up in the world. We can let these things overcome us or we can decide that no, I want to be my best self. And that's what I decided to do. It was a really hard decision, but people were looking up to me. I had people's lives in my hand. And I realized it's like, I'm not just necessarily doing this for me, but I'm doing it for other people. If I can come as my best self and I can show that I want to be, at least as courageous as I could be, that starts to, it's seen by other people and they can start to feel better about themselves also.
Absolutely. Now, you talk about daring to rise. So, what does daring to rise, really mean to you, not just professionally, but personally?
I think it's a call to action. We can choose to stay where we are. But for me, dare to rise is to look at yourself and realize, there's a better person in there, and we need to find who that person is. That's why I named my company Dare to Rise. It's a challenge. What can you do to make yourself just a little bit better today, not just for yourself, but for the people around you? Is there something that you would love to do? Do you have a goal? Do you have an ambition? Do you have something that is like, yes, that's where I want to go? And it's challenging yourself to say, you know what? I'm going to take that very first tiny little calculated step to get there.
Hmm. So, like, was there a moment in your life that tested that philosophy the most?
Yes, I had Also, while I was in Afghanistan, I had some pretty terrible things happen. And when I came back from Afghanistan, I definitely had PTSD. I was really a shell of who I was before I left. Even though I went out there and every day tried to be the best person that I could, and I got everybody, through there. We all got home safely. Whenever I came back, I was absolutely spent. I had given everything that I could, and I was really hollowed out. And I had to find a way back. I had to find a way back.
I love that. It's like sometimes it's rising, it's just showing up even when it's hard, no?
Absolutely. There's going to be days when, things are just not going your way and you show up to work or you show up to your family and, it'd be really, really easy to be grumpy and, you know, wow, that stuff, people pick up on that very quickly, but if we decide, hey, you know what, I'm showing up as my best self for everyone else, you know what, they're going to pick up on that. And then, you know what, you're going to start to feel a little better yourself if you decide, you know what, I'm not going to wallow in the self pity and everything else like that. And it'll actually help you come out of some of those dark places as well.
I completely agree. Now, you have chatted ceilings in male-dominated fields. So, what advice, would you like to give to women on navigating spaces where they might not feel fully seen or supported?
Ooh, that's a tough one. So I would recommend that number one, you have to, okay, I believe that it always starts with you. It's great to have people around you in a network, but it always has to start with you. And you have to find your own inner confidence, your own courage. You have to realize, hey, you know what? I'm here for a purpose. I have strengths. I'm here for whatever your mission might be. Get right with yourself first. And then if you don't feel seen and if you don't feel heard and you feel like okay, everybody is against me, a lot of that is imposter syndrome where it might not necessarily be true. We might think other people feel this about us, but maybe that's our own insecurities. What I would say is absolutely go find a mentor if at all possible. Maybe get two and go talk to them and tell them how you feel. And a lot of times these mentors, they can't hear all the mean little voices in our heads. They have their own, but they can't hear ours. And so what they see is truth. And your mentors can help you see the truth as well. And if you don't have a mentor, find a colleague, find a family member, find somebody who you can actually be yourself with and just have a discussion and say, these are the things that I feel. What do you see? And just by doing those simple little things, you'll realize that, hey, you know what? Maybe I am seen, maybe I am being heard, but maybe I need to amplify what I'm doing. But we have to start with ourselves first.
That completely makes sense, Jen. So, how do you balance standing your ground while staying true to your authentic self?
I think that's actually it's actually a harder question than what you might think. Um, and whenever I first started out in the military, I was really shy. I was very quiet, but I went to a small island in Alaska and we were doing drilling and blasting. And I was in charge of 14 people. I was the only female. They were all guys. They were all pretty much older than I am. They were all more experienced in their own jobs in drilling and blasting. I was there to lead them. And my normal self is to be quiet. But my and that's who I am authentically. But at the same time, I'm supposed to be the one in charge. And so I had a really great mentor that was with me. And he helped me see that it's like, you know what? It's okay. He's like, stand up straight. He's like, that's the first thing. It's like if you can just stand up straight, people all of a sudden start to see you differently. And that's still part of your authentic self. You're just standing with better posture. And I was like, I guess you're right. So I would just sort of you know, stand up straight. And that all of a sudden starts to portray confidence. And so he said, you don't have to yell at people to get them to do what you want to do. And that's what I thought had been done for years. I mean, all of my bosses were yellers. They would all yell at us to make us, think that that's what we're supposed to do. But then I realized it's like, if I just speak with confidence and I talk to people, I don't have to yell at them. You know what? That was actually resonating with people a whole lot more. And that was more my authentic self. So if I just went up and said, hey, let's have a conversation about this, wow, that was so much better than me trying to be somebody else and, pointing my finger and, and all the other things. But I found that to be my authentic self, it worked. It worked so much better than me trying to be somebody else. So I would say that, maybe you are shy, maybe you are an introvert if you're like me at all. And just realize that, what, there's a lot of power that you have. It's not probably, going up and yelling at people, but as an introvert, you can go and have a great conversation with somebody and still get the message across that this is what needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. That authenticity piece is so key. It's what sustains you beyond the titles and achievements, Jen.
It really is. I would tell people it's like, don't get hung up on your title. You know, get hung up on who you are and what you represent in the workplace, around your friends, your family, and all of that. I have found that the people who succeed are the people who are not hung up on titles. They're the ones that are there for themselves and for their people. And whenever you do this, if you're there for your people and making sure that they succeed, that they have what they need, guess what? A lot of times your bosses are going to recognize that and realize, wow, you have a really well functioning team. She knows what she's doing. And most of those people get promoted and they didn't even know that they were up for promotion. But if you are just being your authentic self and you are helping the people that are around you be the best that they can be, you know what you're going to get? You're going to get rewarded for that. Your leaders are going to really appreciate the fact that you're trying to make the organization better and maybe you didn't even know you were doing it in the first place.
Yes. Now, personal growth often requires letting go of old identities. So, how did you navigate the transition from military life to civilian entrepreneurship?
Ooh. So I will just tell you, I just
Mhm.
I've been a civilian. I was in the military. I was a civilian again. I got called back to the military. Then I was a civilian again, and then I started my own company. My husband jokes that I can't hold down a job, which is it's not true. But I would say that we have to grow, and a lot of times we have to let go of some of those prior identities that we had. I'm definitely not the same person that I was when I was in high school or I was in college, and I think anybody that was here and is a listener realizes that they're not the same as they were either. And so it's natural for us to let go of some of those prior identities and realize that we want to expand who we are. We want to mature. We want to grow. We want to learn. We want to be someone slightly better than ourselves. And it's okay to let go of some of those former identities. I was young, I was brash. I was, the one, basically on the borderline of doing something illegal like every once in a while. I never did. I never did. But I was just that's the way that I was living my life. And I've realized that I've had to let that go. I can go and be brash and in other ways, but I definitely had to look at myself and say, who do I want to show up as? And this might not be a 15-minute, conversation with yourself. It might be something that you have to work on, maybe over a couple of days, maybe over a couple of months and trying to figure out, how do I let go of an identity, that was very important to me so that I can grow.
Hmm, that's noteworthy. So, what mindset shift was most critical in that transition?
I would say that the biggest thing that I had to go through was just coming to peace with who I was and who I want to be. And I know that that might sound crazy, but I really wanted and I still do. I still want to grow. I still want to do new things. I still want to do all of these, you know, I want to be a great speaker. I just wrote a book. That was the craziest thing I've ever done. Like I never thought I would ever write a book. But I had to sit down and come to peace with this is where I want to go. And once I came to that peace, I was able to say, you know what? I'm okay to go forward. But it took some time for me to just be quiet and just really think about my thoughts, think about where I had been, think about where I wanted to go. And then in that sort of moment of peace, it kind of came to me. And it was only through that peace that I decided, yeah, this is where I'm going. And this is how I can help people. This is how I can help as many people on this planet as I can. So that's my mind shift.
It's such a reminder, that growth is a constant evolution and not a destination, no?
It really is. I tell people, it's like, don't get on your path and think, I have to get from here to here to here. No, you know what? While you're on that path, look around. You might find a way that there's a better way to get there. I have so many. I also used to be a lecturer at a university, and I'd have all of these, young kids come in and say, "This is what I'm going to be," and I'm like, "That's cool. You go do that." I said, "But don't get so hung up on it that you don't look around. And if you're unhappy with the direction that you're going, do not be afraid to pivot." I know so many people in life that they've gone down this path and they're so unhappy with where they are and like what they've done, but they never had the courage to pivot because they were trying to be somebody that everybody thought they should have been. If they would have just like said, "You know what? This is not making me happy," and just decide, "You know what? I need to shift what I'm doing." You know what? Life is short. Be happy. Don't go down a road and not look around and realize that there might be something better for you.
Yes, and that's again a gentle reminder. Jen, thank you for sharing your wisdom, humility, and courage with us today. And listeners, if you're ready to rise above your barriers and claim your boldest life, follow Jen's work and dare to rise and connect with her. This is Inner Peace Better Health, reminding you no matter where you are, the next rise is always within.